again, and welcome to this special edition of Island Stat Sports Talk. I'm your host, Earl Basin, and joining me is the president of the Bermuda Olympic Association, Mr. Peter Dunne. Happy New Year, Peter. Hope you had a good holiday period.
I thank you, Earl, and same to you. I had an exceptional holiday. Thankfully, my three daughters all were home, which is a rarity. The first time the other three of them have been together in 2 years, so
Okay.
which is
When,
so it's
when,
really wonderful.
when did the novelty wear off?
Well, I'm a very emotional I'm a very emotional and sentimental person. So I cherished every moment about it, having them here. And their intent, was to come and see my wife and myself and spend time together. So it didn't entail a lot of what would have maybe been the case 5 years ago when they were also a little younger. Us staying up late wondering when they're coming home. And thankfully with COVID, it was good, but it was lovely, and lots of details. But anyway, it was good, and the weather, was lovely for people who were visiting overseas and such. So it was a great holiday. It was really good, and from cycling, a lot of people are out chasing this. There's a online thing, this festive 500, people trying to ride 500 kilometers in the 8 days between Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. And so it was really great to see a lot of people out doing that. And, the weather was sometimes good and sometimes bad, but it was great. So it was a super holiday, really good.
Sure.
Really good.
Well, the reason behind this chat is to get an update. Obviously, the Bermuda Olympic Association have two major festivals that they're involved in this year. The first being the inaugural Caribbean Games that will take place in end of June into July.
Yeah, it's a very short window. It's the last weekend. I'm not looking at the dates right now.
June 29th to July 3rd.
Right. Yeah. So
there's only 7 sports, but being an inaugural event, just like we just had the inaugural Youth Pan Am Games, it's got to be an exciting time for the entire region to be involved in these type of games. Now, taking a quick peek, obviously, we've had representation in major festivals for cycling, but just looking at it, it's an opportunity for Bermuda to get involved in this event, if not this year, in years to come, with 3-on-3 basketball, with netball. It gives some incentive to these athletes now that there is international competition out there for them. What are you looking forward to, first of all, in the inaugural Caribbean Games?
Well, it's an extremely exciting opportunity for Bermuda sport developmentally, both for team sports, which traditionally we don't have a high level of representation at. Sorry, I don't know if the echo's on your end or mine.
It's fine. Yeah, it's on your end.
Okay. So, it's again, bringing in some of the team sports. I think is a great opportunity, and it's regional. So that is sort of the playground for most NSGBs when they then go out to first level of international competition is a regional one. And so in cycling, as you know, we've concentrated very strongly on participating in our regional event to get a sense of where we are. And that's now allowed us to move up another level, in my perspective. So the same thing exists in these other sports. So as I said, there's 7 sports that are on the cards, and I've looked at, not in a professional capacity necessarily, but I've looked at the technical manuals for each of those sports, and athletics and swimming and cycling. We know that there are spots there, either because in athletics you get to send, written it down somewhere, but 2 people per event, depends on the standard set by NACAC and such. So there's a process for that, and we know that we have the capability of participating in that. And similar for swimming, we have that standard. And then in cycling, there's a specific mention that the number of spots that is available for Bermuda. And in all these sports, it's similar to the Junior Pan Am Games. It's a younger age group. So in cycling, we think of it as a U23. And other sports, the age group is either narrower. It's some sports it's a 2-year band, and some years it's quite broader than that. Uh, but that gives that's international opportunity. It's national representation, uh, so those are a really strong opportunity for those sports to kind of take that step out of maybe a small regional to a higher festival in Guadeloupe. And then for me, it's very exciting when I look at for netball and basketball and to some degree futsal, which I don't think is not it's purely recreational. I think here, I don't think it's an area of focus for us. But like 3-on-3 basketball plays into Bermuda basketball's hands, I think, extremely well.
Sure.
Obviously, I mean, I couldn't tell you exactly. I'm sure you would tell me how many people are on the bench at a Lakers game, but they're probably 10 guys, 10 guys suited up for a game. And whereas this, at least from what I saw in the Olympics, 3-on-3 basketball is a team of 4. So you have 3 players and a bench guy, and they're substituted back in. So not saying that we don't have the depth of talent, but in terms of numbers and availability, I think that's for smaller countries, smaller population. This is a good opportunity for sport development. And again, typically we don't have the opportunity. We're not qualifying for the Olympics, and reaching CAC games. Basketball becomes a stretch because the area gets where it's talking about a bigger area. But looking at these smaller regional tournaments, that's perfect for us. And the other one that excited me was netball. Now, I think from what I can see, netball, basketball, the 3-on-3, and futsal, they're working off of like a ranking system that has already been in place for these sports as to who qualifies. And I think there still are windows that if some of those pre-qualified teams aren't going to go, then there's a chance for other sports to be added, or other teams, other countries to be added to that roster. To that, so they're basically playing in a round robin type formats. But I think for netball, we're not there, and it's something that I want to sit down and talk to Kamel and the Netball Association about, is how do we get them into that process? What can we do to, like, okay, so they're not qualifying, they're not on the list for this year's tournament, and I think there are only 6 teams that are going to be in that tournament. The lowest ranked of those is, I think, St. Lucia. But we're not even on the ranking chart right now. So this is my approach to netball would be, well, what can we do to help you get to that? How do we start you on that ladder? And I think these are hopefully I think it'll be a welcomed overture, because I think that it's exciting, and I mean, netball is culturally a big part of Bermuda sporting experience. 50% of the population is eligible to participate. We should be, and we could be encouraging further development in that area. So it's very exciting. I think for that, judo is the other sport that's in these games, which I trying to figure out the whole martial arts scene here.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing in Bermuda because we have so many different I don't want to arts. We'll call them arts.
Yeah, and I think I don't have the vocabulary, like the proper terminology yet to really address how that all those different I would call them fighting sports, but I think that's probably a little rough. But how they don't interact, and I know they all have international federations specific to judo or whatever the discipline is, and like taekwondo is, as a total amateur, you're like, well, it's all in the same category, but it's very much not. And so how we look at developing, if this is something that that is there an interest in Bermuda for that, something that we should be facilitating in some way. And even though it's outside of Caribbean Games, the other one that kind of always makes me wonder is why we don't have a weightlifting.
Yeah,
I,
I spoke about that
it's
before.
and what it really takes is someone who is passionate about weightlifting who's out there. I'm totally hijacked
That's
your
fine.
topic
That's fine. That's
and
what we're
going
talking
somewhere
about.
else. But like I think that like what I've found in other organizations when they've started up is like you have to find someone who has a passion and who wants to lead that type thing, has enough experience at least to get something off the ground. But I think weightlifting would be a very interesting discipline in Bermuda. It's something I think that isn't very heavily facility driven. Uh, so yeah, I think that would be kind of in that area. So maybe judo is in that same. But obviously we have a lot of people who participate in the various. I don't, what how you would properly term those.
Right.
Maybe yeah. But I don't. Is there a basket that we can put judo and karate and wushu and all those others in? Maybe it's inappropriate to put them in a basket.
We'll put them in a basket, but they won't put themselves in a basket. They'll want to be
I
individual.
and I think that's quite rightly so. I mean, like for example, we have a, a winter ski association, right?
Mm,
Which actually in Bermuda, that's the sort of the. Sorry, I hope I'm not getting too much background noise. Uh,
no.
but we have a winter ski association that embraces both downhill, moguls, half pipe,
Mhm.
Nordic skiing, because we just don't have the depth.
Right.
So maybe that's something that we mature into or develop into. I don't know, but like I don't know that we need to necessarily have a single entity to deal with all these other uh, fighting sports or which.
Mm.
I
Well,
have to get like John. Somebody has to call me and say like, "Hey, here's the category. Get it right." You know, because it is a
they'll
technical
call me
term
too.
that. Well, I'll say Earl suggested. No, but no, I think
Arts.
that
They call it
there are great
arts.
opportunities though.
Styles.
Yeah. Yes,
But,
in
but Peter, the Caribbean Games is starting off at real small with the 7 events. What is the opportunity for Bermuda to host the next one? Only because, as you raise your eyebrows, if we were able to host the Island Games in 2013, and that had over 15 events going on at the same time, a sporting event that we could utilize and possibly host all the same sports, if not even a few more, at a youth level. Wouldn't we want to try to host something of that nature to I guess emphasize, publicize, show Bermuda in another realm of what we can do for quote unquote sports tourism?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't turn any of those opportunities down. I think one of the challenges, there are numerous challenges for a place like Bermuda to host these types of events. And uh, when we hosted the Island Games, which John Beard and his committee, did a fantastic job of building community involvement and enthusiasm for it. Uh, it's huge resources, but I mean, you think of if there's that much support for Carifta, there could be that much more, even more support for something like this. Uh, but I think that we're going to have to make sure that we can deliver the quality that we have the physical structure in place to do that, and that we then can develop the event as it is as is necessary.
Mhm.
As you'll know from looking at other international games, the biggest driver right now is the cost of hosting these games. And there even
Yes.
some of these major tournaments, they're talking about having multiple host cities
Mhm.
because it's just so expensive for one place and one place to be
Yeah.
closed down for that long. This one is smaller. It's in a box of these sports. Only one of them would require public like facility, which would be cycling from
Mhm.
roads. Um, and so I don't know. We there are issues around swimming and the technical requirements for pools and warm up
Mhm.
pools and all sorts of things, which is sort of outside of my own personal understanding.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think that some of these, if we're able to look at this, and even if the commitment is, well, maybe if the region supports this the first edition, and then somebody else says, well, yes, let's do it, and then then I think that it's appropriate down the road, and maybe whatever that cycle is, that Bermuda consider throwing their hat into the ring to host that type of event, because within each of these sports, maybe not judo, but we have a national federation who would most likely step up, and that's what happened in Island Games. For the most part, the national federation for each sport stepped up to host the individual sport, and then all the component technical arrangements around it.
Sure, sure.
So,
Now, obviously, now let's move on to Commonwealth, which is going to be in July and August, July
mhm.
20th to August 8th, in Birmingham, England. We know what the COVID's doing. We didn't talk about COVID for the Caribbean Championships, the Caribbean Games, but we know what the UK is like right now. For the Commonwealth Games, we have the defending gold medalists in triathlon in Flora Duffy. We have the record holder for high jump, which is now, I think, 32 years,
Mhm.
1991. So for us, we have a lot at stake at these games coming up. What's your initial thoughts on the Commonwealth Games for this year?
I have a lot of initial thoughts, some of which I probably shouldn't
I
share.
saw you
Uh,
thinking just
yeah, well, I'm trying to, I want to try to be politically correct in the way I want to be factually correct. And but first, I would just say on the COVID side, COVID's everywhere. It's a
Mhm.
consideration no matter where you go. If you go to
Right.
the grocery store, if you go to a football game, or if you're traveling overseas. And so, like I've said to my cycling athletes, let's COVID is a given, so everything could be changed because of it, right? We know that it's out there, and then we're going to have surges, but we're not going to prepare or allow ourselves to think that we're not going to do anything until we're 100% out of the woods, because if we do, we will be in a position where other people have gotten ahead of us, or we've lost a lot of ground. We this past year, last 2 years in cycling, we focused on keeping our athletes motivated and give them competitive opportunities when and where they were available,
Mhm.
uh, safely. So that was really our big issue, is to make sure that people stay focused on these things. So the games will happen or they won't. I mean, that's, I know that seems a little ridiculous, but there is a chance that, in the world where we can't travel at all in the next 6 months. And so that's just going to be a fact, and it's dictated by external factors. Uh, but once we do, accept the fact that we want to have athletes at these games, and we're working for that, we have to make sure that we have or as many spots as possible to get there. And I was at a dinner last night with a prior a participant in Commonwealth Games years back. It was Chris Hedges, and he was saying, "Oh, but every country gets to send theirs many, their best, and who they want." Well, I said, like, those days are long gone,
Long
and
gone.
so we are effectively getting allocated a number of spots, and I can assure you that number is far smaller than we would like to have.
Mhm.
We're in the dilemma of trying to, and from my understanding, still new to this, and I'm only just getting looped into some areas of information, is that the allocation of spots is being by sport is being done at the Commonwealth Games Federation level, not at the BOA level. So we're not even in the position to say, okay, you gave us X number of spots, let's divide. Okay, athletics needs this, and swimming needs this, and triathlon gets that, and cycling gets this, and archery gets that. It's not working. That Commonwealth Games Federation is saying, here are your spots. You've got X in this sport, and X in that sport. So that is not happy news from my standpoint, from my
Mhm.
perspective. And I don't know the methodology of working around that, the details of it. But I'm gonna try to dig into that a bit more, to see how much additional leverage that we can bring to make sure that there are more opportunities to go to those games. Uh,
Mhm.
and to some degree, I'm like, well, if the Commonwealth Games Federation diminishes the number of people to participate in the games, then our interest, in some ways, is going to diminish,
Mhm.
right? Like, if but I think that clearly we have the defending gold medalist. who, where I would expect her to be on the floaty part pontoon or whatever, wherever they're going to start the triathlon. Uh, and so, we want to build on that. And I think that we do want to be a part of these games in as big a way as possible. In some sports, we have a growing number of athletes who are very capable of competing at that level, right? Not necessarily on the podium, but all of these major festivals have a significant component which is based on community building,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, even as you would know, leading up to Commonwealth Games, there's a Queen's Baton Relay, which has been whizzing its way around. It was in Africa, and it's now moving, I think, through went to Seychelles recently. They're posting stuff all the time, which is
All the
great.
time.
And
Yeah.
that is truly a Commonwealth, not a Commonwealth Games, but a Commonwealth, effort to
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate to this global community that through sport we come together,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's an important component for Bermuda to participate in. It's created opportunities for athletes in the past because of the connections made through games, and for that reason, we want to be as engaged in these games as we possibly can, and represented as well as we can.
Mm-hmm.
I think that hopefully we have, as I'm, couching my words a bit, but that we have as much representation at the highest possible level. We have some great athletes who, clearly were gold medalists in the last games.
Mm-hmm.
Question is, who's the next one that's going to go? Who else are we going? And who else can emerge onto that world stage in a similar fashion?
Sure, sure. Obviously, we know the baton is due here in May. When
Yeah.
can we start seeing some of the events around the arrival of the baton and what the plans are um, for the time it's in Bermuda for the 2 days?
Yeah, well, we're is very active working on that. Dej Miners, who is works as an intern specifically on that project in the BOA office, has laid out a broad framework. We have basically it'll be very different from the past. In the past, it was a very ceremonial arrival. A
Yeah.
whole entourage of people trooping what used to be down the stairs off the airplane with
Mm-hmm.
the baton. Um, Right now, this is all happening independent of the entourage, the traveling entourage. Uh, so probably the arrival would be like ceremoniously popping it out of a box type thing, and there's a way. But so there'll be I think it arrives. I should have that date
22nd.
memorized, but there you go. So it's the Saturday, like Saturday would be the arrival. Then Sunday we're working on a draft of activities, basically to visit different locations across the island, uh, and there are themes associated with the baton going through the island, some like sustainability and hidden locate or unseen places and historical places. So, some what we're trying to work on is having the baton not only most of it will be graphic images of it, like hopefully we'll have sea cadets in St. George and going to different places along the way, but also having the baton at sporting events. And usually by mid-May, there are lots of events going on that it can be incorporated into those events during that day. And then the following day, which is a Monday, uh, Dave's working on a program for schools so that we can, we're still on the assumption that we're still in a COVID world, so that there's not a lot
Right.
of those pictures of the past of, 200, primary school kids all gathered around the
Totally. Yeah,
baton,
yeah.
like, which is always so lovely. And those are the emotional bonds that they're trying to establish. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but to try to do that in a COVID friendly way. And so, we're working on that. So I think that we'll have another meeting in the next week or so, sort of hammering that out, and then we're trying to work on with Government House as the highest representation of the Commonwealth in Bermuda, um, to work on an event with them which would also include past Commonwealth Games participants. So to try to reestablish those connections of the prior athletes to the ones who are then who will be going this year. And I imagine by the time that happens, we'd have a clear idea of that, of who those people are. I'm hoping, but I mean, some sports, they do allow for qualifications up to a very late date, as trying to report that out to the public. And the public might be saying that, how could it be? It's July 1st and we don't have the answer. Well, if track and field's qualification system allows, or window, which is established by World Athletics, then that's the system that they're using. And so we just everybody has the same thing in others, these sports where you're trying to hit standards or qualifying times.
So some sports have up until 2 weeks before the event to have their last opportunity to qualify.
Right, and then you have to find a tracksuit in their size, So, so it's very it can be very stressful. But I think that we'll have a really great. I'm trying to build that enthusiasm for the games, and I think that as I said, Dej has done a great job, and getting it into schools, and it kind of reestablishes, tries to create that foundation of what the purpose of the Commonwealth is, and the Commonwealth Games, and what it represents, and then also to represent out to the world what Bermuda represents in terms of the Commonwealth Games. So there is a very active social media program for that, and that of course goes out to all the member Commonwealth federations. So you see, there's an awful lot of interaction there, which is really great. So to demonstrate. To me, I of course see it like as a sort of a competition. Like, how are we going to be better than St. Lucia or somewhere else? Like somewhere else. How do our images going to be as exciting and representative of our culture as well as our sporting community?
Sure. Well, what we can do is monthly give an update on progress into these two major festivals for 2022, just so the public is updated on what's going on. If we can. Give an update regarding events, teams, qualification standards, if they've moved left or right, and obviously what the COVID situation is. I think the more we can give information publicly, I think that the more people will be involved in making sure that athletes are fine-tuning themselves in the right way. I think a lot of times we've prepared in like silos, and then all of a sudden we know, well, Peter Dunne's part of the team. Well, I haven't seen Peter. Those are the type of things that hopefully we can change and make sure that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I welcome the idea of monthly updates on that. In public forums such as this, because it's important to understand that, and for the public to understand it. Sort of what often, from my perspective, has happened is that people see the result and they haven't seen the process that's gone through, and the process isn't necessarily the topic at the end of the day, but the result comes as a result of the process, and so that's the challenging part, I think, is making sure that we have. Sorry, I was just looking for something. That we have enough transparency, and the public has the opportunity to see, what we're up to, what that process is. On standards for Commonwealth Games, the sports that require standards, the athletes are aware of them. The challenge is, and I can just, give you that little peek into cycling. We set a very high standard because with the hope that we would be able to, the maximum number of cyclists that any country can send, road cyclists, is 6. Okay. And so I'm up for that. We have an amazing pool of talent right now, that all of whom in at least the time trial would have finished in the top half of the last Commonwealth Games, the ones in Gold Coast. But based on their average speeds, they would be able to, now we wouldn't be able to put 5 or 6 in. We could, in time trial, you can put in 2, but for a road race, you could, easily, we have guys who are in the top half of the field. I'd be pretty
Mhm.
excited to have that. Uh, Getting spots from the Commonwealth Games Federation to that allow us to put that number of people in is totally a
Yeah,
different
it's an
kettle of
uphill
fish,
battle.
right? It is a very much an uphill battle, but it's also like we could set the standards almost anywhere, but it doesn't mean that we get an unlimited number of spots, right?
Right.
And it's almost in the past, and I'm not, it's not an accusation or a criticism, but when you look at, in the past, if we said, here's the standard is X, whatever it is, let's say it was, you know, what's Devon's record in the 100 meters, 10.24 or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
check his email address, and those last four digits are his time. But so if you set it at 10:25, let's say, and we had five guys run it, it doesn't mean we get to send five guys, right? It's the same.
Yeah.
It's similar situation that you see in the U.S. or big countries when they had the Olympic qualifying time is X for the marathon, and you have five guys who qualify, but you can only put in three. So then you have to choose,
Mhm.
right? And I don't think it's. I would like to see our numbers grow, like we have more opportunities, but we're at the situation where we're going to have to be selecting, which seems to be a very it's a very unusual experience for Bermuda at high end sport to say,
Mhm.
oh, we're going to in this specific discipline, we're going to pick one over the other.
Right. Right.
It doesn't happen very often.
Mhm.
Maybe at Carifta where where the numbers are really big, right?
Right.
But basically,
Right.
even at Carifta, if you make the time,
Yeah.
you're going. And it's in
Yeah.
cycling, we're limited by team size, but that team size has
Right.
always been just a little bigger than we actually have have enough talent, to qualify
Right.
to be there. Uh,
But we're striving.
so
We're heading in that right direction because you could see the growth of the athletes if given the opportunity to compete. So I mean, other sporting bodies can look at that and say, let's try to figure out ways to get our athletes to compete at a higher level on a regular basis, and then maybe there's a possibility that collectively the sport grows and then internationally are recognized. I know
yeah,
we can go back to 2019 when the national football team had enough time working together to prepare and then went and stunned the region with their performances, with their results and so forth. So given that time and opportunity, there's the sky's the limit for Bermuda. If again, just given those mechanisms of time and the ability to compete and train at a higher level on a regular basis, I think that bodes well. And I know with several of the cyclists now over in California training, getting ready for their
mhm.
season, we should see some positive things when they do start to compete in early March.
Yeah. Well, I mean, put on my cycling cap. Uh, we're going to send a team of six guys to the Vuelta Internacional Dominicana in Dominican
Hmm.
Republic at the end of February.
Yes.
National team of six guys. National team. I last night I had dinner with Chris Hedges, Elliot Hubbard, and
Mhm.
Greg Hopkins and Caden, because Caden's heading out today.
Right.
And Chris and Elliot have been, like they saw. We have never had six
Six
guys, and the oldest of
at
them
the
is
same time.
28. The
Right.
oldest is 28, and the others are all well under 24 or under
Right.
24.
Right.
So um, it's a boom time for us. So we're going to this competition, uh, and I mean, you ask Dominique, who's but we're going there to win. We're
Mhm.
going there for significant results. We may not get them, but the confident they're very confident because they know they're doing the work. They know that in the past year, when other countries have been kind of sidelined and haven't been able, like Belize, which was always a competitor of ours, uh,
Mhm.
they had no racing for almost 2 years,
Right.
no domestic racing. They had
Right.
guys who went overseas, but they had nothing
Yeah.
happening. And
Right.
so it's I think that it's a good event, good opportunity for us, but it's like as developing a big enough group, talented enough pool, the guys who can race together, who can compete together, depending on whatever the sport is, if it's a team sport, um, and then giving them the opportunities, and then hope, and to do that you need the funding, so
Sure.
there's a whole nother topic, where's
Yeah.
where's funding for team sports going to come, or developing,
Right.
I'm sure for netball and basketball, we have to develop the talent. We have to identify it, develop it, nurture it, make
Mhm.
sure that it can stay in, and that we're giving them all the right tools to get there. So
And we have to set out a sort of a years down the line achievement program as well, because we know inaugural things, when they happen, you might want to achieve certain things and then obviously build on that. So we have to, the expectation level, I think, is the one thing we also have to work on as well, because obviously there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, we should be beating everybody, regardless of where they're from or whatever. But the reality is that the opportunities that they have with the quote unquote funding is far greater than what we presently have, and that's something that needs to be addressed.
yeah, long-term goals are they I think you got to break it out into, what are our near-term goals, our medium-term goals, and long-term goals. And I was saying to Caden last night that, our long-term goals are probably beyond, in cycling, are beyond his career
Hmm.
as a competitor. A
Hmm.
really long, like that, because, that an 8 years from now, um, he'll be nearly 30 years old. He'll be 30 years old,
Hmm.
which is, getting to the end of, a long
Right.
career.
Right.
But if our goals are only focused, say, on his performance, then always, and he catches the flu, or whatever, or catches indifference,
Right.
then we don't. That's not a long term goal. That's just an athlete specific goal, right? So
Right.
we have sort of the sport, the 10,000 view, or whatever view, the high view of the
Mhm.
sport that the BBA looks at goes beyond each athlete. But of course, each competitor is 100% valid at the time that they're there,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, we I was looking at something that there'll be a youth Olympic Games, really cool, in Senegal. You'd be
Hmm.
like, I mean, how cool is that? Uh, I mean, very is the answer. I assume it's in Dakar, because there's not a lot
Yeah.
of other,
More than likely. Yeah.
structure beyond that. That's in
23.
26, I
It's
think.
26. Yeah. 26.
26, right?
Right. 26.
For cycling, the kids who will be eligible to do, like, you probably have seen Charlotte Millington, she just turned 14,
Yes.
but in
Yeah.
racing,
Yeah.
actually, she's just turned 14, but for cycling, she's born at the end of the year. So for cycling, she's 15 years old now.
Right.
She'll be too old for that competition.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, when you think about it, like, so if that's, I mean, Charlotte's a wonderful athlete,
Right.
she's has the potential to be a wonderful superstar.
Mhm.
Uh, Sorry if that embarrasses her, but but these events happen in very tiny windows, and you have to meet the criteria on the day. So below her, I'm like, oh my gosh, who's coming up next? Like, who is going to be? If you're thinking about developing an athlete for Youth Olympic Games, and that games is going to be huge.
Right.
Like, at least on paper, it's going to be
Yeah.
huge. What 13-year-old? I mean, 13-year-olds are doing a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's I don't it's really hard to imagine
Right. But the good thing
which of those
is,
little kids is going to be,
yeah. But the
you know
good thing is, Peter, when we have these things on the horizon, it's an incentive to not only get the parents involved, get the athlete involved, but it gives them something to strive towards. And we know what the deadlines are. We know what the restrictions are when it comes to age per
Yep.
discipline, per sport. We know what those things are, so we can actually be gearing them towards those type of things over a period of 4 or 5 years to meet those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, it's very the 4 or 5 years between whatever it is to 26 weeks, 4 years. So it's like it's nothing if you're Flora Duffy who thinks in terms of these 4 year cycle, you know, her
Yes.
Olympic cycles.
Right.
I'm sure it's not completely nothing, but it's like it's a normal thing. If you're
Right.
13 years old and someone says you can't do it until Thursday, they're like, ah,
Yeah, yeah.
you know. So they like this. So like other than talking about it now in this forum, like I wouldn't mention it to a 13 or 14-year-old for like 2 years
Mm.
because I don't know where they're going to be in 2 years' time.
Right. Right.
Right. But so, I mean, and I think that always comes out. We see which athletes have that stick to itiveness, who have the drive, you know,
Mm.
you know, are rising in terms of their performance because it's not just oh, you've got one in that sport, we'll send it. You know,
Right.
it even at those younger ages, it's all it's performance based,
Hmm.
and you want to give those, you know, want to make sure you're sending athletes that are going to who are complete athletes, and it could be that at that point there are no cyclists who are capable of
Right.
even competing at that, you know, being more than just a attendee.
Right.
And so I think that we want to, you know, that's beholden to it's my obligation and the sport of cycling's obligation, whoever is running those coaching programs down the road, you know, to be thinking about that and developing athletes, you know, with those if they want to achieve those goals.
Hmm.
Uh, and the same is going to apply whether it's football or 3-on-3 basketball or such, you know. But you know, there's a lot of opportunity out there in sport. There's just a ton, you know, and I
Sure.
think that uh, you know, I look at the enthusiasm that each of the sports bodies brings to their sport. You know, we just got to, you know, harness it and like my input, you know, switching back to talking just about from an Olympic perspective, it's like my goal is like how do I facilitate the pathway
Hmm.
for the organization, the pathway for individual athletes. You know, that's we need to be making sure that we're doing everything we can uh, to give them the opportunity to sort of realize their sporting potential.
Mm.
And
Well,
I think that we have the opportunity to. There are tools out there for that. There is support for it. It's just a question of, you know, like everybody talking the same language. You know.
mhm,
Um,
yeah.
so
Well,
anyway, you know, it's been I haven't figured out what I'm going to do from Olympic standpoint. Uh, you know, from a regular communication standpoint, I'll probably, you know, torture a bunch of people by producing a monthly newsletter like I do in cycling.
mhm,
You know, but I think there are ways of communicating that. It's been an interesting year. I mean, we had this incredible sporting high, of course, of a gold medal at the Olympics, which I don't,
mhm,
you know, a small country like Bermuda, of course, never achieved something like that before.
right.
Uh, and then we've added on a very down note with, you know, passing of three people who have importance in sport:
Mhm,
Mike, Antoine, in bowling, and then
mhm,
recently John Hoskins, who
yeah,
died just before. It was my predecessors running the Olympic Association, and actually going out to a memorial gathering for him later this afternoon.
yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it's been a tough year. I think at the end of the year, losing people who are, you know, Commonwealth medalists and an Olympian of great, you know, who's publicly you know, well known and well liked, and a leader of the sport of
Mhm,
the sporting community. So that's been a big blow, I think, to people. You know, at the end of the year, but. Uh, you know, I think it's always take those with all those people taught somebody else how to do something really well. Uh,
sure.
you know, I mean, I'm sure that even in your own area, you know, spent enough time with Mike to know to picked up one or two things, and I appreciate my relationship that I had with him. You know, John taught, you know, Judy how to do things. Judy's teaching me how to do things in from the BOA, and of course Antoine is not only a Commonwealth silver medalist, but a you know, somebody who was deeply engaged in the bowling community as a coach and an administrator and such. And you know, there's people their legacies are going to continue to live on for quite some time,
Definitely.
which is what we want. You know,
Yes.
that's what immortal means, right? Or
Yeah.
that's what the reality of it is. You know, that
Sure.
people are going to have these long legacies that we can all benefit from.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I look forward to speaking with you again in a few weeks' time just to get another update, especially on the inaugural Caribbean Games, which will be some significance as just like the Junior Pan Ams were the first time ever held. So if someone does well, wins a medal, it'll be the first medal of the games for Bermuda. Something that we can hold, dearly to the fact that we now have a medalist in another games that considered regional, national.
Keep raising our profile every step. Like I think
and that's all we can do.
Absolutely.
Let everyone know this little tiny island has a lot to offer.
Yeah, we're here and we're ready to play.
Sure.
And I think that's you can see that in the sporting community. People are pumped. I mean, success breeds success, right? They say that in business, and it's true for the most part in sport. You see what that next higher level is. You see the enthusiasm. You see the respect I mean, clearly in Flora's case, I mean, a little more than respect. We have to give her a new title now. I don't know how often I'm going to use that, but maybe in writing. No, it's really, that I think that is pulling athletes up, and everybody's, not everybody expects to become a, knight of the realm. But the idea that, from this little island, we have can produce some great athletes and develop them as well, that's to be good.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks for keeping this to 20 minutes as I promised. Oh,
well,
wait.
we did say, I did say 15, 20, but we started another 20, so we're all right.
Okay. 15 plus 20 plus something else. Yeah. So we're good. But no, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I mean, it's a very exciting time. It's very, for me, it's very exciting, but I think, I look across all the various sports and there are great things going on, and, we just need to find a way to publicize the successes of our athletes, the struggles as well, and then and continue to support them through the community, financially, emotionally, everything.
That's the important part. I think a lot of athletes who, especially individual athletes, I guess I want to say fear people knowing that they haven't done well, and I think that perception is one that has to change right away, because if you're out there competing, you're competing. You've got these opportunities, and the only way people will support is if they see progress. So sometimes falling down is a good thing, because it's how you get back up and how you fight the next day. I think people would admire, and that's where the help comes in the long run.
Yeah, I got it, because I'll drag you right to the end of your time. But on that subject, when I'm planning events for athletes to go to, you're keeping athletes involved. They're competing for success, and so you want them to have events that they can actually exhibit or have a successful experience. But sometimes you need to flip that and actually plan. I would plan for them. I wouldn't. Well, now I'll tell them. I have expectation of failure in a particular manner that's safe and controlled and whatever, so that they can see or have a learning moment. Because sometimes if you think you're the best on let's say on Chapel Road in Paget, that would be Duncan Simons would be upset with me, but he lives out the other end. But if the reality is that you're the best in this small area, you need to step out. And then if you get beaten, and then you say, as your coach comes back, you come back and meet with your coach, and you say, well, okay, what didn't go well, and what are we going to work on? What's our learning moment or teachable moment out of this? And I think so that's very positive. But we got to keep pushing those, giving them opportunity, giving athletes not just to go straight to world championships or straight to wherever. I've tried to plot out a very successful, like with this group of cyclists, we could go to events almost around the world, with the national team, which gives you the right to get into a whole bunch of events. But there's no point in going to do a stage race in South Africa if you can't have a positive experience out of it.
Right.
So we do that intentionally. And the other thing I wanted to just mention is, like, in terms of astounding accomplishments, is the Sebastian Kemp.
World Athletics?
Yeah, and no, in sailing,
Oh, Sebastian
Malaysia.
Kemp. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
Sebastian Kemp. Right, I thought I had that. Like winning a world championships
hmm
is like if that happened in athletics in Bermuda, we'd be going crazy.
Yeah.
If you had the world champion, like junior 100 meters, and you have a junior world champion,
Right. Right.
that
Right.
is an amazing, amazing
Oh yeah,
accomplishment.
definitely. His accomplishment is a big accomplishment. Yes.
It's huge. I mean, not everybody's out sailing, and not everybody has the ability to, but
Right.
that's a huge accomplishment.
Definitely.
Huge accomplishment.
Definitely.
So yeah, we in all sorts of things, we're
Yeah.
definitely punching above our weight. So
Definitely. All right.
okay,
Well,
great.
thank you very much.
Okay,
Enjoy the
yeah,
rest of
okay,
your day.
I will
Okay.
do. Thanks. Okay, bye.